What if one of the Spider-Verses is literally just like an office worker, and they just happen to also have spider powers, and they're like, I got these, but like, no way am I going to use them. He just like
just
sits at a
because I have this
computer.
doesn't mean I have to be a hero.
Right. I really look. My CPA career is enough.
Well, everybody, this is the 11th episode of the podcast, and that means nothing. There's nothing special about the 11th, except that today's guest is the one and only Trace Dominguez. Now, if you don't know who Trace is, first of all, I'd be really surprised. He's been doing this for far longer than I have. But yeah, he's one of the original like OG science communicators on YouTube. You might have seen him back in the day on Seeker or D News. He's worked with the Discovery Channel. And of course, there's his own channel, Uno Dos of Trace. Clever wordplay there. I met Trace in person about 9-10 months ago on a thing that we talk about at the end of the podcast. But I was really excited to get to meet him because honestly, he was one of the people that kind of inspired me back in the day. You know, he was doing this thing that I wanted to do, and then I got to do it, and then we met in person, and sure enough, we kind of hit it off, and now I consider him a friend, and it's really cool. It doesn't get much cooler than that. But I wanted to get him on here just because we had some really fun conversations. I knew it would be a great time. Plus, I just wanted to catch up on things because, you know, it's been a while. So this might be the most conversation so far. What you're about to hear really is just two guys just shooting the ish, and it goes into all kinds of places. But I guess the biggest takeaway, the most important part to me is when we start talking about how everything is interesting if you're curious enough. You know, if you're curious enough to look into it, any subject that either of us have ever done a video on or anything just in life, when you really look into it, no matter how small and seemingly insignificant it might be, once you really dig in, it can get really interesting. I don't know, it kind of made me think of that quote from Ted Lasso, you know, be curious, not judgmental. Which I think I just said that just to put a Ted Lasso quote in here. Actually, who said that? It was Walt Whitman, I think, that he was quoting. I think it was Walt Whitman. I could be wrong about that. But anyway, this was a fun chat with a fun guy. Not fun guy, but how about I stop making bad puns? And let's just jump right into my conversation with Trace Dominguez. So when you were growing up, did you find other nerds that you like ganged up with and became friends with and kind of had your own little circle?
Yeah, I think so. We had like our own little weird, quirky. I grew up in a very small town. It was one where like we got a new high school one year, my last year in school, and we went from the long cafeteria tables that like folded up with benches to like round ones. And the round ones were so different because then your little lunchtime cliques had to be much more tight. You couldn't just like expand along a long table.
Yeah.
So we had our own little table. It was by the front door of the school in like the commons area, which was our cafeteria. But I found I could actually sit at most of the tables. Like most people, our school was actually pretty friendly. You know, the quarterback was also in the musical. He wasn't a particularly good singer, but he was interested and wanted to be in it. And so it's like, that's kind of cool. Like it was different than you see in movies. Like,
wasn't that an American Pie? Except it was lacrosse.
He was
the lacrosse player
by a guy from Michigan, from the East Great Falls in American Pie.
That's where it took place. You're right.
East Grand Rapids, which is where the guy who wrote it was from. And I think Gerald R. Ford is from. Look, if you want some Michigan trivia, welcome to
finally
trivia,
there's a
Michigan
connection
trivia
between
chat.
American Pie and Gerald Ford. I've been looking
I
for
grew up
that.
in this small town, and yeah, we had our little nerd friends. My friend Brian, my best friend since I was 2, we met while like doing somersaults at a church in downtown DeWitt that's now a brewery. So times have changed. But like the two of us were 2 years old. We're friends ever since. We were just texting yesterday, so it's been
That's
forever.
cool.
Yeah,
Lifelong
and we would
friends.
go to Star Trek conventions and talk about Babylon 5 and go to the mall and go to the bookstores and like pull out Star Trek books and read them and stuff because we couldn't always afford to buy them. And like we had our own little nerd group. It was nice. It was really nice. Of course, his other best friend Shane is now like a surgeon and was also like the guy who lettered in academics, played the trumpet and lettered in band, but also lettered in golf, track, swimming. Like anything he tried, he was he lettered in it, which was very, if you think about it, actually like American Pie, very like movie-esque, where it's like we got 2 Star Trek convention nerds and then like another good friend who's just good at every sport that he'd ever done. And we were just like, cool, Shane.
We get to hang out with that guy.
Yeah, what's it like? What's it like to be good at stuff?
Also, when you say small town, like how many students in your school, or how many people in your town?
I graduated with 160 people.
Okay.
And so the town, I think, had a few thousand.
Yeah.
It's called DeWitt. It's just outside of Lansing, and Lansing, Michigan, right in the middle of the capital. I'm pointing at my hand where you're supposed to point. And, we literally, when I grew up there, had maybe 1 traffic light in the town, downtown. There was another one that they put out in the township, not really the same thing. And that was out on the highway. And then they built a new highway, so they changed the name of the highway to Old 27. And they had New 27. It was a highway that was like a real one. Ugh. Anyway, then we got a McDonald's and everything changed.
That was the beginning of the end.
No, it was the beginning of like, yeah, we're cool now. We have a McDonald's. Then we got a Burger King. Wow. Then we got
so
a
it was
Bob
one of those
Evans.
like suburbs that the city kind of grew out into. And
Yeah, exactly. It was just outside of a slightly larger town. And there was like a main road nearby. So we slowly got, for Michigan and Midwest people, we got a Meijer. It was a big deal. It was a real big deal. Yeah.
So in Texas, small town Texas, it's Allsup's. Allsup's is the convenience store gas station that's in every single small town.
How do you spell that?
ALLSUP''S. Allsup's.
Allsup's.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah. And they're kind of famous for their awful bean burritos. Awful, but you just got to have one, It's been sitting there in the heater for, 2 days straight.
But it's delicious.
Somehow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, we didn't have a McDonald's growing up. We had 3 stoplights when I was growing up.
Wow. Big town.
But,
big place.
Well, it's gone down to 2. The meth epidemic has taken its toll.
As it does.
Yeah. But so my graduating class was 48.
Okay. Small. That is
Yeah.
small.
But most people, when I talk to, they're like, oh, I'm from a small town. I'm like, how many people in your graduating class? And they're always like, oh, like 300. I'm like, no, that's not.
Yeah.
Our
whole school.
150 is pretty close.
Our whole high school was 900, but it grew a lot. So like our class was only 160. And then I think the freshman class was like 200 and a half, like, I don't know why I said it that way. It's very weird. But like it was
200.5. Wait,
200, 100, 300 minus. No.
What's between 200 and 300?
But yeah, the town grew a lot. It was mostly like government employees, GM employees or execs, kids. So like some people would come to school in like a beat up Toyota that like was all rusty, and then someone else would trade in their like extended cab white Dodge 2500 pickup with like diamond plating, and the next day would come to school with a motorcycle and be like, oh yeah, I traded it in. I'm just like, what is your life? My first car was a Volkswagen Vanagon.
Ooh.
Top speed is 70 miles an hour if you're redlining it downhill.
Uh-huh.
But it had air conditioning. So
similar. My first car was a Volkswagen Beetle,
nice.
74 Beetle that could not go in reverse.
How'd you back out of spots? You just had to pull through.
I just had to park in a place where I could go forward when I left it.
Did you ever make that mistake where you're like, oh,
well, it's such a small car, you could just push it.
Oh, yeah. You open the door, put it in neutral, and just like use your foot. I've done that.
I've literally done that, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. I had a Volkswagen Fox as well. It was similar.
Oh, those are fun.
Idea. It could go in reverse, but it had the reverse gear where you like push down and then like go to the side.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. After a while,
and nobody knew how to do it because they don't think of that Z axis. It's like, wait, what? Push down. I did eventually get the gear replaced, and so it would go in reverse. But I kept the gear. I don't have it here anymore, but it was like stripped, just completely stripped.
Whoa!
It was pretty wild.
Cool. Yeah. I bought the Fox for $800, $813 and change. And that's inclusive of taxes, everything.
Mm-hmm.
Drove that car for almost 2 years. Never gave it an oil change. Like, why? Why bother? The car was $800. Had wires hanging out of the dashboard where the radio used to be.
Yeah.
Man, I loved that car. No internal lights. I had a flashlight hanging from the steering column that I would turn on at night to see how fast I was going.
Uh-huh.
It was in kilometers
funny.
per hour anyway, so it didn't really matter. But man,
Yeah.
I loved that car.
I actually did a lot of work on my car, got a new steering wheel, and because I was a 17-year-old kid boy that thought he was a little gangsta, I like put a big speaker box in the back and would listen to rap music and run around and like boom boom and everything.
That's great.
It earned the name Basic Nugan. So that was the name of my car, was the Basic Nugan.
I love that.
It was fun.
The Fox had really nice speakers, so someone else had done that and then sold it. So it had like the muffler that was like chrome and really big, and like really like big diameter muffler. I burned my leg on it more than I found it useful, because you like go into the trunk and you're like, ah,
Yeah.
it had like, the radio wasn't there because I guess it was a nice radio. So I replaced it, of course, with a radio that I had gotten for free from my friend's mom's boyfriend's store. And it was a tape deck that the dial to change the radio had a dial. No presets, no buttons. And then the dial broke, so I pulled open the metal and just twisted the knob that was on the circuit board. And that was the radio that I had. It was a great radio. And I had one cassette tape that I got from Goodwill. It was just hot, hot, hot. So, how you feeling? Hot, hot.
Oh,
hot.
yeah. Buster
Like
Poindexter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the only, and it was the single. So I really had that. Whatever was on the B-side, which I think was a remix.
And it got stuck in there so you couldn't replace it?
I could, but that was the only cassette I had at that time.
Oh my God, wow.
So I just listened to that a bunch. I eventually got the Weezer Green Album sampler cassette. So you only got like 1 minute of each of the songs. I think it was some advertisement.
Wow. That's even better than recording off the radio. And you got like that DJ voice that talks until the guy starts singing. You're like, shut up!
I'm trying to listen to this song. And anybody under the age of 30 is like,
I know.
What
we've
the
lost
hell
them
are
all.
they talking about?
Yeah. Bunch of geezers over here, man.
Although cassettes have come back, even though they sound terrible. Come back.
Nostalgia.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a faster nostalgia curve now than maybe there used to be, maybe just because things change so much faster now.
That's a great point. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I agree for sure that people are nostalgic for things that happened like, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, which is odd, but whatever. It's kind of nice to see the same fashions that I was wearing when I was young being cool again.
Should have hung on to those Jenkos.
Oh my God, I saw an image of a guy that's like still rocking the Jinkos, and he was just like standing at a bus stop with his pants. I think it was photoshopped because those pants were big, but maybe not. Jinkos were quite large. It's like some 35-year-old dude standing at the bus stop in Jinkos.
Oh, from like recently?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think it was a meme. A meme. It's cute.
A meme.
Yeah. A little meme.
Well, so, okay. Growing up, being a nerd, did you see? Okay, I didn't really have nerd friends. I was such a small town, and there weren't really a lot of nerdy people, and I didn't have a lot of friends anyway. But which is prime nerd. But
ooh, yeah.
But like people talk about playing D&D growing up and stuff like that. Sure. Like I never did that. We didn't have a comic book store in my town, so I didn't really have comics or anything like that. I didn't have nerd culture when I was growing up.
Yeah,
Not
I
really.
did some. I think, but it was still small town Midwest, which, to be clear, I think the Midwest, at least Michigan in general, I call it the Texas of the North. It's a big state. It thinks it's super important and better than all the states around it. It has its own culture. It has, all of these things. I think there are very similar kind of attitudes between the two states. My cousins lived in Texas, so I was really exposed to a lot of Texas's culture growing up. And I found it to be very similar and complementary. But we had two bookstores at the mall before Barnes and Noble became a thing. And one was a Christian bookstore, and that's where we would get our Star Trek books, and they were like tucked in the corner down by like at the bottom of one of the shelves. And so like we found nerdy things where we could. And you know, it wasn't Christian, like it only sold, I don't know, Bibles. I don't know why you buy a Bible. You can just get one. They like hand them around everywhere. They're like, here, have this New Testament. Like, oh, thanks. You know, like, oh, sure, free book. But like, we found places to be nerdy. I never really played D&D growing up. One of my other best friends, Matt, he loved his older brother. He had an older brother who played D&D. And so we played once, and I thought it was a lot. It was like very complicated to get going. You couldn't just like sit down and play D&D for an hour and then go do something else. You had to like commit to, and I don't know, an ADHD kid who was 13. Like I don't have that kind of, I can't pay attention for that long. So we did a lot more like running around outside imaginary games where we would play, you know, heroes and villains and stuff, but we'd make them all up because we also didn't really have comic book stores or anything. So we found our own nerdery. And it helped that my dad's a nerd. He liked computers and stuff. So I had a computer when I was 10 or 11. I got my first computer, a Commodore 64. It was cool. Mostly I used it to play little music things and like play games and things. It was cool. It was really fun. But like, I don't know. I think I was lucky to have other nerdy people, for sure, around.
Sure, yeah.
And Brian was really into Star Trek, so then I got really into Star Trek. And Matt was really into, like, computers as well, so we had that in common. And his family was all nerdy as well. Like, his parents were copy machine repair people. And, like, so they were just, like, a nerdy family. They had, like, geodes and, like, those wooden trolls that you get at like, the nerdy stores with, like, the rain sticks and stuff.
Oh, I know.
They had two parrots. Parrots were wild.
Two parrots.
Everybody else had cats and dogs, and then I go to Matt's house and they had like parrots walking around. It was cool.
I seem to remember we had like a parakeet when I was a kid, but like it wasn't cool or anything. It was just like this bird in the house.
It just made a lot of noise.
Yeah, it just made a lot of noise, and we had to clean up after it all the time.
My Aunt Cindy had an iguana. That was the weirdest. She was from Florida, so there I guess it made sense, but she brought it to Michigan once.
Well, they just run around out there now.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
I went through a reptile phase for a while.
Yeah, that's good. That's good nerd. Like good nerd cred.
Yeah.
Like, did you have a snake?
I never had a snake. I had a roommate that had a snake. I had an iguana once.
Turtle.
I had my favorite ever was a prehensile tail skink.
Cool. Fun to say.
Solomon Island skink, also known as.
You got all straightened up when you said
Skinkus solomonus or whatever. But it was actually a really cool lizard. It kind of had this like perma smile on its face. It was just like a goofy looking thing, and it was a sweet little lizard.
That's cute.
Now on the opposite side, I actually went to like a herpetological convention thing one time and got a Nile monitor lizard.
Cool.
It was a beautiful lizard. It was like black with yellow spots, but you know what that means in nature? Stay away. Yeah, but I bought one, and it was after I bought it that I realized, oh, these things grow to be like the size of alligators.
Big. Yeah, they're big.
And it was mean as hell too.
Oh.
Like I couldn't pick it up. It would bite me and stuff, and thankfully
bad.
I found somebody that would take it, but that was a terrible decision.
This was clearly pre-Google. Be like, oh, should I go Bing this and see if I should take this home?
Jeeves, what about this lizard, Jeeves?
Oh, Jeeves. You know, I knew Ask Jeeves wouldn't work when my friend and I Googled, or well, we didn't Google it. We asked Jeeves who put the glad in gladiator, and it couldn't tell us the answer. We're like, well, this search engine's not going anywhere.
Who put the glad in gladiator?
Yeah, Hercules, clearly.
Okay, why?
It's a Disney movie. It's
the lyrics of I never
Disney
saw that
movie, Hercules. It's a great Disney movie.
Does being in band make you a nerd? Because I was in band.
I was in band as well. What'd you play?
Trumpet.
Trombone. Sub brass section. Even within the brass section, though, we would have had a little fight because trumpets, full of themselves and stuff.
Oh my God. To this day, when I tell, especially women, that I played trumpet in high school, I get that all trumpet players are assholes. And I'm just like, okay.
You're like, I was just a nerd who played the trumpet. I don't
Yeah.
understand all this vitriol.
I was like 4'9". Like the
I
trumpet was
mean,
bigger than me.
was it the trumpet or the cornet? We had a lot more cornets than trumpets.
Okay, so starting out, I played cornet,
yeah.
and then later
Can
I
you
had
tell me
a
the
trumpet.
difference? The trumpet's a little longer, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're really trained in your ear, you could probably hear a difference, but I probably couldn't.
Yeah. I played the trombone. Didn't have the one with the thumb key, just the old school slidey one. Brian, best friend Brian, sat next to me. He played with the thumb key. He had the cool one that he got at a vintage
So you got to
store.
get that like. Does that make you Italian to play trombone when you do that? The gesture.
Like, hey,
but
we'll
you got
play
to
the trombone. Yeah.
You got to work out those wrist muscles to get like really fast,
Yeah, you really like. I thought, okay, this will be easy. It's a slide. There's no buttons to remember, and turns out it's actually pretty complicated. But it makes it more fun, I think, because you can kind of wow, and like I don't have the trombone. Yeah, and you can use a wah wah to like do stuff. Although then you're like blowing and holding it with your shoulder and like sliding and also wah wahing at the same time. It gets really complicated. But I really loved band. I learned a lot of musical instruments. I played the trombone in band. I tried the baritone for a while. I was not great at it, but I tried. It was fun. Like a big trumpet, right? Just the same like 3 little buttons.
Well, okay, so there's the one that like sits in your lap. And then there's the one that you play on the field, which is like just a big trumpet.
Like a sousaphone, like a big
trumpet. Yeah, sousaphone.
I never did marching. We didn't have to do marching to be in band. They changed that requirement, I think, last year that I was in school. And I was like, look, I've never marched. It's been 4 years. You want me, like a senior who's going to graduate in a semester, you want me to learn how to march? I'm good. I'll just skip band this semester and pick it up next time. So I did that.
So
I was in the jazz band more.
Yeah, we didn't have we just had band, and it was marching band, and then on the in the spring it was concert, whatever. Like, but in the fall it was marching band. The funniest thing to me about marching band is you can always tell the kids that are in band because they walk in step. Like just walking down the hallway, they'll just like naturally get in sync, just subconsciously. That's funny. And I would notice that I would do that too. And you got to learn how to. God, how many steps was it between yard lines? I've already forgotten. 12. It's not 12.
I like you say you've already forgotten. Like you were doing this last weekend, and now you've already forgotten.
In just 30 years, I totally forgot.
I can't believe you've already forgotten this.
God,
it's incredible.
My brain's going. But no, it served its purpose really well as I got into filmmaking. Yeah, because I was a human Steadicam. Because that's all what marching is. Like you got to like do the heel toe. Yeah. So that you're not banging your horn against your mouth.
Yeah, for sure. You had to be really steady. I never thought about that.
It came in handy later on.
I was always in jazz band. We had a big enough school, I guess. Maybe the crossover is somewhere around that 100 students per class mark or something. Yeah. But we had a big enough school where we had a small jazz band of like 20 to 40, depending on the year. And then the marching band was always like everyone who's in band. And they had like a separate band track for like symphonic that was more like what you're talking about, where it's marching in the fall. And then in the spring, it would like just be concert band. We never had a string section, though. That's where I was like, ooh, that's the next bigger school. They got a string section. Wow.
Yeah, we didn't have any strings either.
Everybody was like disgusting blowing in them instruments. None of those like fine strings.
With the spit valves.
Yeah,
the nasty band hall carpet.
Blow in there. And then you go to the nice school, and they're like, and you're like, oh, all right, that's the nice school across town, I guess.
So we didn't have a string element to our band or orchestra or anything like that, but I did learn violin at one point.
Ooh, cool!
I took violin lessons.
Were you good?
Okay, I've learned how to play 3 different instruments. And I played them all to the point that I was better than bad. And then I lost interest.
Honestly, that's fine. Can you still like, the thing is, I find with musical instruments now that you're an adult and you're not like sitting around playing musical instruments to fill the time. It's like if you picked up the violin right now, could you pluck out something you think?
Something might come back. Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
still got my trumpet, and every once in a
there you
while I'll
go.
bang it out and I can still play the fight song. See, I'm doing the fingers right there. I can
I
still do
love
it.
it. I love
Yeah.
that. That's great.
But the violin was earlier. I was probably like 8 to 12 or so when I played
Oh
that.
wow, cool.
Yeah.
You must have
And
had
I played
parents that were
piano before
like,
that.
my parents tried to get me to play piano when I was 4. I did not take. I can play one song. I think I learned it when I was 9. That's the only song I can play, and then I quit. And it's like in the basic beginner's book, it's just a waltz, and that's all I can play on the piano. I learned to play the Muppets theme song in high school for fun,
That's fun.
but I can
Wait,
never do
the
two-handed.
Muppet Show tonight.
Like dun dun
Dun,
dun
dun,
dun dun
dun,
dun
dun, dun, dun,
dun. I'm
dun.
like playing
Yeah,
it on
yeah,
my
yeah.
desk, but
I
yeah.
gotcha.
But I can only play one part at a time. I can't play like dun 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 dun, and also the Muppet. I can't do the two-handed
Yeah.
thing. I just can't make my brain work that way. I feel like.
So, of course, like behind me, I don't know if you can see back here, I got a little guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people are like, oh, Joe plays guitar. It's like, I have a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's covered with dust. And from time to
Sure.
time, I know like 4 or 5 chords and I can play like, Counting Crows songs, because they don't deviate from that. Um, but when I was a kid, I would learn. I wanted to learn how to play things, but I never really got into like music theory
Yeah.
or anything because boring, right? Um, Bored me to tears. But now I'm like really interested in it. I find it really interesting. And like Adam Neely and those guys that like just break down
So good.
12 tone, like
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
get into like why this note feels this way and why this combination of notes rises to this,
Yeah.
emotional peak or whatever. It's just like, that's so
Oh,
freaking
I
cool.
love that. I agree. It's just like watching music channels, and I'm just like, there's very few things that I'm not interested in, but that's one of those where I'm just like, I have no way to conceptualize
Yeah.
what so my background, I have a BS in psychology. I took basically all the psych classes that were offered at my university, even the weird ones like music psychology.
Hmm.
And if I remember correctly, you can like listen to a song 11 times according to what I learned in this class. Maybe I'm misremembering, but it's like 11 times. If it's your favorite song, you've probably listened to it like up to 11 times, and then it starts to fall off in favor. Like you've learned enough about it that now
Oh,
it
okay.
like plateaus. Like oh my god, this is super good. Oh my god, it's great. It's super great. And then it's like, okay, well now it's going to be great for a while, but um we learned all this like psych stuff, but we never learned the music side of it. We just learned the like experience in the brain and like psych side of it,
Mm-hmm.
which was fun. So I find all that so interesting. I learned a lot of musical instruments. Even though I played band in high school, I played trombone, like I said. I use so in college I worked at a museum, and when you work at a museum wearing a costume of the 1880s soldier, and just sitting around all day, you have a lot of free time. So I learned the harmonica. I tried to learn the bagpipe. I can get it going, but and
Oh,
the
wow.
bagpipe only plays 7 notes. Like you'd think it would be really complicated. It's actually pretty easy.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Um, yeah, and so like you can really just play those 7 notes, and they just kind of combine in different ways. And if you like essentially like kind of half hole the notes, you can make weird noises. I learned the fife, which is like a
Mm-hmm.
woodwind. That was my first woodwind. I could play the concertina. I could play like a couple songs on the concertina, which is like a very small accordion.
Oh, okay.
The penny whistle, because they're all like these historical instruments.
Yeah, yeah.
And when you're wandering around, so this museum's called Mackinac State Historic Parks. It's in between Michigan's peninsulas. It's on an island. There are no
Mm-hmm.
cars there. They outlawed them in the 1890s. So it's just horse carriages, bikes, and these like fudge shops and like
So very
t-shirt shops
Amish.
and stuff. And I worked at the museum, which is an old fort from the 1780s. And we were portraying the 1880s. So it's like, it's fairly peaceful time. We're just like soldiers at this fort in northern Michigan. We don't really we're not doing war demonstrations or anything. And so you end up with a lot of like free time when there are like answering questions. And so I would just grab a concertina or something and sit around and play music so that the guests knew where I was, but also was entertaining myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a pretty good ear for music, so it was really fun to learn all those musical instruments. I can still play some of them. I have a fife here somewhere. I don't know where it is.
That's really cool.
But it was great. Learned a lot at that job. I really loved it.
Um, I'm trying to think of the most recent. Like, my wife and I went to Salem last year.
Cool.
Very cool town. I mean, the part that we saw anyway. But we like went to the House of Seven Gables and there did a ghost tour.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, oh,
love
you
ghost
got it.
tours, not necessarily because I think I'm going to see a ghost, but just it's a history tour, really, is what it is, and with a little
Yeah.
spooky to it.
It's a spooky history tour.
My favorite part about that was the lady was walking us around, and I wherever we were, she asked, like, is anybody staying in the whatever hotel? I don't remember the name of it, but that was where we were staying.
Yeah, and you're like,
And she was
hello,
like,
me? Yeah.
oh, okay, that's the most haunted building in town.
Is that
Sleep
good?
tight.
Are you happy about that?
Right. And of course that night I'm just like,
What's that? What's that noise?
yeah.
That's funny. We did ghost tours at the museum a couple times. Like, I loved them. They were really fun because you got to like wear different costumes. Like, we would always do 1880s stuff, but during the ghost tours, we would do the whole history of the fort, which went back to the 1780s. So we could wear like 1812 uniforms because they had some battles there in the War of 1812. So it could be like dead 1812 soldiers and telling people the history. It was really fun.
So you were playing
really loved it.
characters, or you were just dressed that way?
Typically, so day to day, I was just Trace,
Yeah.
a Western Michigan University psychology student in this uniform. But when we would do special events like that, we could play the characters. And I never did theater, really. These were like the closest things that I did to acting. Acting. And I was probably not great at it, but it was fun, and I really enjoyed it. Some of the guys took it really seriously. Like, I had a goatee for most of my 20s. People have regrets. And that's one of them. And it was fine. But, like, it wasn't historically accurate to different time periods that we were representing. And so they'd be like, you shouldn't have that goatee because it wasn't accurate in the 1880s. And I'm like, well, I'm still just Trace, though. I thought we were just being me.
You're like, what about my nipple piercings? Is that... No? Oh, okay.
Joe, don't out my nip piercing. Telling the whole radio world. I don't actually have nipple piercings. Sorry. Maybe one day if I'm feeling my
That was a
midlife
joke,
crisis.
everybody.
I'm still a nice Midwestern boy.
No,
so
like
tattoo, I had to like hide it.
Oh, at the thing?
I got a tattoo on my back of my left leg, and I was like, I'm gonna wear pants. I'll wear pants. Grandma will never see it. And then she saw it and didn't care, and I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Dude, my mom has a tattoo now.
Yeah.
I still don't. I've never gotten one. I've never thought of something that's I think is important enough to etch onto my body,
Yeah. That's funny. I got 2 Chinese characters on the back of my left leg, left and leg. So it says left leg on my back.
I remember you telling me about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And now I also have the solar system to scale on my right arm. I've thought about other ideas, which would be fun. I worked at TLC for a while before I started doing YouTube. When I worked at Discovery Channel, and then at the company, they own TLC as well. And I was working on the Ink shows. They have like LA Ink, New York Ink, Miami Ink. It was like a time on TLC. And this one guy, an artist named Corey, they asked him, do you regret any of your tattoos? And he said, no. Like, I don't always think all of my tattoos. Yes, Barleycorn, I'm in the middle of a story, buddy. Yeah, you can't rub on the microphone, pal. So,
Oh, cats. So
Corey was like, I don't regret any of my tattoos because they were a time in my life that it was important to me then. And I was like, that's a good attitude to have. I thought that was kind of cool. So I don't think it has to be like, oh, I have a tattoo that maybe if you only have one, that's tougher. He had probably dozens, hundreds, who knows?
Yeah.
But like if you have a few, then it's like, oh yeah, that's when I was 20. This is when I was in my late 20s. It was a really weird time. So I got that when I thought it was funny at the time. Now I recognize it's not that funny or whatever. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Well, the way my memory is going, I'm probably gonna have to turn into like Memento and just start like tattooing information onto myself so that I can remember it later on.
On your leg, like my name is Joe. I have to wear shorts to know my
anniversaries
own name.
And yeah.
When's your anniversary? left elbow, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I always lose things because I put them someplace safe and then forget where I put them.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I know that. I know that feeling.
So I need to then
all the
tattoo it on myself so that I can find. Yeah.
time. That's funny. Yeah.
Well, no, just you were talking about doing the museum stuff. I've always thought that would be really interesting and fun. I mean, just kind of like being I mean, it's kind of like what we do on YouTube, but it's, you know, in person and people can ask questions and stuff. But it's funny, like going back to Salem, the ghost tour that we went on, she was like really into it and, you know, seemed to really enjoy doing what she did. But the guy at the House of Seven Gables was just like, he would get up there and this is the kitchen and this is the fireplace. And they didn't have, you know, a hallway like you normally would have because back then they didn't have the heat and the electricity and stuff. And then he would just kind of like go sit in the corner.
Oh, that's too bad.
All right, you want to go to the next room? Okay, this is the next room over here. And, you know,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, that's tough. I feel like maybe that's why the museum I worked at hired a lot of college students, people with a lot of energy and excitement, and they would only be there 2-3 years and then they go move on to something else to keep that energy up. One of the things we learned, so we read this book by Freeman Tilden that was all about museum interpretation, and I hated it. There's actually a picture of me, like a old school with film picture of me that has now been digitized, of reading it where I'm literally asleep with the book over my face and like headphones in, because we had to read it for this job. And wow, did I think he was pretentious and thought he knew a lot more than he did. Yes, Barley. But one of the things that he talked about was like interpreting to children, interpreting to adults, which in the museum world, interpreting is like doing what you think of as like docent work, where you're talking to people, answering their questions, etc. And they said interpreting to children and adults are essentially the same thing. You don't dumb down information for children. You might have to phrase it slightly differently because they don't have the same vocabulary, but you don't just be like, yeah, isn't that cool? Like that doesn't, they're smart enough to know what they want to know. And that changed, I think, like I worked there from 2002 to 2007. So like 20 years ago, I started working there. And learning that, I talked to this kid and they said to get down on your knees and get at eye level to the kid because you're a big, tall, imposing figure. So if
and there's something about leaning down that's kind of condescending.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they said get on their level, talk to them like they're a human, and answer their questions. And so I did that once, and I remember to this day, this kid, we had just done a cannon firing. We had to fire the cannon like every hour or whatever. And this kid comes up and says that they have a question. And so I got down on my knee and I looked him in the eye and I said, yeah, what's your question? And I think it was something like, when you fire the cannon, you fire a real cannonball? And I was like, no, we don't fire a real cannonball. We're just, but it was like he had this question that he just needed to figure out how to get out. So it was just being patient. I think that's very similar to what we do on YouTube today, right? Like we're essentially doing the same thing. We're trying not to make things, when I do SciComm, I don't make it dumb. I try not to dumb it down. If I'm going to use a bit of jargon, I will define what that word is because I don't want to assume everyone knows what it is because that's not fair. But it's also like I don't want to assume they don't want to know that word. Like I'm not going to not use the word entropy and I'm just going to be like, the universe is filled with chaos. I'm going to be like, well, it's technically entropy, which is not really chaos, but it's an interesting idea and it's more accurately, described with math. So we'll just go with chaos for now. And it takes longer to say, but people can kind of learn from that and you're not dumbing it down for them. And I don't know, it taught me a lot. I don't think I would be doing YouTube if I hadn't worked at that museum.
This podcast episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. If you're someone like me who likes to find interesting things, you probably like the work of David Attenborough, who's kind of known as Britain's premier science communicator. And you can watch a ton of his stuff on CuriosityStream. This includes Light on Earth, which is a fascinating documentary about bioluminescence in nature. In other words, how animals and plants create light to communicate and hunt and mate, which is pretty much what nature does, so that's pretty much the extent of it. But that's along with some other documentaries like Ant Mountain, which explores the world of ants, Deep Ocean, which is about life below sea level, miles below sea level, and Hot Tuna, which is not about a spicy tuna sandwich, although that sounds delicious right now. It's about the Atlantic bluefin tuna, which is more interesting than it sounds. It's a very interesting documentary. But his documentaries are kind of famous for kind of getting footage that have never been filmed before, so they're all groundbreaking in some way or another. And they're, of course, just one of a handful of thousands of documentary films from some of the best filmmakers from around the world on just about any topic you might have any interest in: science, art, engineering, history, you name it. It's all on CuriosityStream. Even better, when you sign up with CuriosityStream, you get free access to Nebula, the streaming service that I'm a part of, as well as many other of your favorite YouTube creators, where you can watch our videos completely ad-free, along with extended cuts and companion videos and original series, like my series, Mysteries of the Human Body. Nebula is basically a curated list of awesome, smart YouTube content, free of any algorithms or advertising. Seriously, most of the YouTubers that I follow are on there, and I get to watch their videos with no ads, and I get to see them early because they release them on there before they release them onto YouTube. So yeah, it's a really cool service. And the best part is you can get Nebula and CuriosityStream for the insanely low price of $14.79 for an entire year. I feel like I've done this sponsorship so many times. I think people kind of tune out how insane that is. It's less than $15 for a whole year for 2 services. I did the math. It comes out to 62 cents per month per service. Just try to find another streaming service that has that kind of deal. It's amazing. You'll never run out of amazing content to watch with that. So yeah, to get all that, just go to curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. Again, that's curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod, and you can start the process of wondering why the hell you waited so long to do this in the first place. Look at me guilting you. Sorry about that. Anyway, because science says you got to hear something 3 times, let's do it one more time. curiositystream.com/JoeScottPod. Go check it out, and thanks to CuriosityStream for supporting this podcast. Now, let's get back to Trace. I was going to pivot into that exact direction. Like, do you think that having that experience kind of led you down the path where you are now? And
yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, if I hadn't worked there, I wouldn't do YouTube now, for sure. I don't think, like I say for sure, and then I kind of backtrack. But I don't
absolutely
imagine,
maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe, perhaps. I don't know. I think the YouTube world is so similar, and this museum work gave me that, I don't know, you get a taste of talking to people, informing them of something they may not have known, and you see their faces light up, or you see them, they get excited to come and ask you questions, or to like come and just talk about it. Like, they don't even have a question. They're just like, oh, what you said about this was so interesting, and like, can you like tell me more about it? You just see people getting excited, and that happened with every part of that job, because we would cover everything from the 1812 war, like I mentioned, to the 1880s, which is funny because in the 1880s, Mackinac Island National Park existed. It was the second national park in the United States and the only one to not be a national park anymore. So it became a national park in 1875. And so then we would end up literally talking about like, okay, well, how do national parks get made? And we're not a national park. We were a state park at that point. Became a state park 1895. Still know a lot of this.
Yeah, you retained a lot of it. Well, I guess when you do it every day for 5 years.
Yeah. Sick. And so it's just like you end up talking about literally all sorts of things. We had original 1873 Springfield rifles that we would fire every day for demonstration. They were original ones from the 1870s all the way into the 1890s. And we had to learn to take them apart and put them back together. So we had people who were like super into gun hobbies. Like, they would come and want to talk about it and hold it and be like, oh, I have one of these. It was my grandfather's. And it's like, so you learn about it was just so exciting and like fulfilling in a way. But there was also a lot of freedom. So I ended up learning about things that I was curious about. And really got to dig into my own nerdery and be like I did a tour that nobody else did because I wrote it, about just like the economics of the American fur trade, specifically focused around Mackinac Island, because it was such a big part of the economics of that area. And the tours were always small, but people were interested and wanted to know more. So it was fun. It was like, you have to learn about whatever you want. History is an open book.
and it changes as time goes on.
Yeah.
Or the interpretation of it changes.
Totally. depending on
Um,
who's telling it.
so what you were just talking about, like actually seeing people's faces, watching the lights come on in their eyes, and being able to interact with them and stuff, like uh, that's definitely not something you can do on YouTube.
Definitely not.
And I imagine that's amazing. I've never really done that.
Yeah. Well,
But that
sometime
seems
let's
like
go
it'd
to
be
Mackinac
great.
Island and you can put on a uniform and we'll have you tell people. I,
I'll take you up on that.
um, yeah, YouTube, I try and conceptualize it differently. Like the commenters, a lot of people don't read their comments, and I'm not going to disparage or encourage either way. I like to read my comments to look for those moments, to like pin the comment that has something interesting to say about the video, reply to comments that have interesting questions or just like complimenting. I'll like reply thank you or
Yeah.
whatever. I usually ignore the ones that are mean, or I hide them if they're really mean.
Mhm.
But like I try and get little tastes of that through the comment section, and that makes it even more fun because you can really, I can imagine that there's the people that are so excited, there's someone that wrote like a 2-3 sentence comment where they're like, oh my gosh, and then what you said, like you could take it and do this, and like I could learn that about it, and I'm just like, yeah, you
Mhm.
could, you should do that. That's exactly why I make these videos, is to get you excited about doing something even beyond what I just did,
Mhm.
hopefully.
I always tell people that I'm the appetizer, not the entree.
Hmm.
Like I don't have to my videos don't have to have every detail or specific fact about this topic that I'm covering. It just has to be interesting enough to make other people go look into it more. And then I've done my
Absolutely.
job.
Yes. 100%. When we launched D News in 2012, we read abstracts. We told stories based on the abstracts and like other people's writings about it, somebody
Mhm.
who had access to the paper, because we didn't all the time. And we learned a lot about reading papers and how to like read a scientific paper and what to look for and whatever. But like, I never thought of us as we're telling you what this paper, why this, we're not telling you why this paper is necessarily important or whether this paper is good. We're just like trying to get you to go and read more about what's going on in the world of science. Like when we first launched it, people were like, is there enough stories to tell a science video every day? Because we were doing video every day. And it was like, yeah, there is, definitely. Like dozens and dozens of scientific papers are published like
Literally every
all
day.
day, every
Yeah.
day. Like it's crazy.
Mhm.
I didn't know that at the time, but eventually I was able to be like, yeah, there's more science than we could even cover. And we're making 14 videos a week.
Well, and also there's been a lot of times when I'll find a subject and I'll start like doing a video on it, and I realize this is really more like 3 videos
Mm-hmm.
to really cover all the different aspects of it or something. So
Mm-hmm.
there, yeah, things that I always talk about rabbit holes. I was going to ask at some point if there are any rabbit holes that you've gone down. I like to ask people that. But like every topic I cover is a rabbit hole, and it's like there's always 1,000 times more stuff involved in it than I thought there was, and almost every single time it's not a matter of is there enough to make a video out of. It's like, okay, what do we actually keep in this video?
Yeah.
There's way too much, always way too much.
I, my answer, if you ask me what any rabbit holes I've been down, is every video is a rabbit hole. Like every video that I've ever made. Um, I'm going to counter question with my friend Mary Beth has an amazing first date question that she asks everybody she goes on a first date with. What are you not curious about at all?
Oh,
And
okay, yeah, that's a good one.
I thought that's a great question that I have since probably asked as many people as she has, because I find it fascinating, and I can't think of an answer. Like
Wow, yeah, that's
I don't watch sports. Not
yeah.
really. Like sometimes I love going to sporting events. I like watching hockey and soccer and stuff. I grew up in the Midwest, so hockey is a big deal there. And like I grew up playing soccer. I don't learn anybody's names really. Like
Mhm.
I don't know anything about the individuals playing the sports, which I think if I did, maybe I'd like it. And that's where I'm already getting into the rabbit hole of like, yep, obviously I'm curious about this because I acknowledge that there are things that I could learn and probably would like it better. And like, it's just
Yeah.
comes down to committing the time to learning it all. So I don't think there's anything that I couldn't find interesting about anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the history of like people are like, oh, well, why would you want to watch paint dry? And it's like, well, let's talk about the different types of paint and how different types of paint dry. And like, do you know if those big chunks of like oil on paint in museums are dry? And if they are, how long do they take to dry? Because maybe they took like decades and they were still like an amorphous solid for a long time.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, like who
Is it still liquid?
Who knows? It's so cool. Like literally, there's nothing that's not interesting. I don't know. Anyway.
No, I'm with you. I like everything. Like you mentioned sports. I'm not particularly interested in sports. I don't really follow it that much, but I can see why you know, people really get in, like in baseball, people really get into the stats. And and if you really understand the nuances of the different moves or whatever, like, you know, there are people I know, they're like really into boxing. They call it the sweet science, you know, because there's like all these different, I'm not even going to try to put words to it, but you know, if you're into something, you can find enough interest in it to make it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
You got me thinking about that question now. Is there anything I just don't really gravitate toward? I mean, there's definitely things I'm more interested in than others, but.
Right. But if somebody presented you with a topic, right? Like that's where my friend's answer is space. She's just not interested in space at all. And I just don't know what to talk. Like I just can't comprehend. Yeah. Not necessarily because it's space. It's just I can't comprehend not being interested at all.
Right.
If somebody who, like, I don't actually think boxing is that interesting, but if I bet you somebody you knew who loves boxing came and started talking to me about it, I might still be like, this seems gross because it's just two people punching each other. But I'd also start to see the nuance of it. And that's what makes, I think, anything interesting, is that there are nuances to basically everything.
Yeah. That is an interesting question, though. It kind of makes you think.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't steal it. I want to put it on my podcast.
No, fair enough. But no, I like to, I am always just finding something that I'm like, oh, this is interesting, and getting into it. Might be for a video, it might just be something I ran into, but I like asking people that question. And it might even be just like, is there a TV show that you're watching right now, or a book that you've read that's, you know, kind of grabbed you?
Yeah. I mean, the world is the reason I don't like VR versus AR, to start a flame war.
Okay.
I think AR is the future. I think VR is the far, far future. So the reason I think that is because the world has so much more fidelity than a virtual environment. Like the further you dig into the reality of everything around us, the more interesting it is, not the less interesting. Whereas VR, the more you dig into it, the less interesting it becomes.
Okay.
And so it's just like you have to invent all of the layers of VR. Whereas AR, the layers are already there. We're just augmenting it. We're just making it more interesting. We're adding, you know, a token economy, a point system on top of the world that already exists. We're upping the saturation of the colors, you know, whatever we're doing, but it's already there. We don't have to create. We just have to make more interesting, make better. So I feel like AR will be our first big step into building a built environment on top of literally everything.
Yeah.
And then VR will come someday in 100 years when we're like, oh, well, the computer that used to fill the size of a warehouse is now fits on our wrist, so we can literally invent anything we want on the fly
and just upload ourselves to the metaverse.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
No, I did a video in the metaverse not too long ago, and
is it
so
scary?
I got a Quest Oculus. Is it still called Oculus Quest, or is it Meta Quest now? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, I got one during the pandemic because I was like, we're all stuck in our homes. Maybe it was more like a psychological exercise. Like, is this a way of like escaping and feeling, you know, like I'm getting out of the house or something? And I don't know that I used it enough to really say one way or another, but there's things about it that I find really interesting. And I go through phases. Sometimes I'll pop it on every day and play a game or do a thing, and then I'll just like put it in a drawer and forget about it for a while. But the thing that I talk about in the video is how it has that pass-through mode. So like if you're outside of the Guardian barrier or whatever, and you're just like walking around in your house, like you can see, and it's like very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the depth perception is really good. Like you can literally just pick up things, and it's like it's right there. It's like it's real.
Oh wow.
And so that kind of sold me on the idea of AR, like you were talking about. Like you could literally, assuming it's better pass through than what we've got on that, because it's just kind of like black and white. It's like an old
Sure.
TV or something.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you could put a virtual jukebox on the wall and just go
Mm-hmm.
like play
Yeah.
music or something, and
Right.
just
Or
augment your
yeah.
house with these things.
I mean, the more you think about it, the more AR becomes interesting.
Mhm.
Over the years, Joe, I've had like so many jobs over the years. Like 20 some jobs. I have a whole talk about it that I give to students. It's like you don't have to decide what you want to do now. Try a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
Whatever you don't like, you're going to learn immediately, and that's more valuable than thinking you might love this. Like knowing what you don't like is actually better for you, because you're
I
like, oh,
like
I
that.
know
Yeah.
I don't want to do these things, so that eliminates a whole subset of career opportunities,
Mhm.
or like career ideas. So I tried all these things, and when I was working with Group 9, one of the things we were doing was VR. A lot of it, like there was a team at Group 9 making VR videos. I think it was like every week, every few days they tried to release one for a while,
Mhm.
like a week, and like for a year they tried to release one all the time. And man, they called it, so the guy who really was pushing for it called it an empathy machine, which I agree with. I think if you make a human story, like you can put a VR camera right next to someone's face in a way that would make the viewer feel much more empathetic toward them, because you're standing close to them in a way that you wouldn't in
Mhm.
normal conversation. It's jarring, it's exciting in some level, you're
Mhm.
like, wow, I'm so close to this person's face and I don't know them. But it also makes you feel for them a little bit. So they made a lot of like those empathetic stories, which were cool. But it also lets you, fly around like a superhero, or, play games that in places you never could. So it can do a lot of stuff. But AR was always more interesting, I think, because exactly of what you're talking about. Like it becomes so natural. I feel like it's one of those things where you're using your phone and you're looking at pictures on Instagram and you think of it as reality, or like people who use Snapchat filters as reality. Like AR will also do that, right? Like everyone will look like an anime character if you want them to, or maybe if it communicates with your AR, communicates with their AR if they want to. You are all avatars at that point, but you're just you. If you lift up your AR glasses, you just see their face, But
Yeah.
would
Oh
you
God.
want to,
Yeah.
right? Humans, we're weird.
Actually, it'd be kind of cool if you could put like TikTok or Snapchat filters over your face
Yeah.
to smooth your skin and give your
Yep.
eyes a glow.
Just like
And
regular walking around.
yeah,
As long as your AR headset told the other AR headset what to put
right.
over your face, which, let's be honest, not a stretch.
No,
Not a stretch.
I look forward to that because as the
You'll
years
look,
go by, I need it more and more.
be like, is that Henry Cavill? Oh, hey, Joe, what's up?
I'll digitally remove my mustache. It's
Why
Superman.
shave? I don't need to. My avatar doesn't grow hair.
So talking about things that you're not interested in, I saw John Mulaney, a comedian. He played here in Dallas, and I went with a friend.
John Mulaney.
John Mulaney.
Yeah.
I saw him doing. I'm not gonna do it. So okay, I've always been a fan, right?
Yeah.
And he gets up there, and a lot of it was talking about like the drug problems he's had over the last year and whatnot.
Sure.
And that was funny and enlightening. But at one point he was like, I don't care about science at all.
Gasps in science.
At all. Yeah. and then he goes on, and I was going to bring this up and say like, are there things that you're into, and when people talk about them, you just clinch up because they're saying something wrong? This is what I'll make sense here in a second. He started talking about the space race.
Okay.
And I'm a fan of this guy, right?
Yeah.
I've loved John Mulaney for years.
Just takes you out of the experience immediately.
Okay, I'm trying to remember. He was basically like, the Russians put up a dog into space and then never did anything else.
No.
Right. And I'm just sitting there like, and all these people are like, ha, 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 laughing around me. And I'm like, but that's not true. That's not
true,
That's
John.
not even remotely true. For like 11 years, that was
Excuse
the
me.
only way we could even get to the space station was through the Rush. That's not
Yeah.
true.
They have cosmonauts. They
Yeah.
have people. They flew the first person. They have a whole
Yeah.
holiday about it on April
Yeah.
15th.
And like, it just took me right out of it. I couldn't even laugh anymore. It was just like,
Oh man.
that's not even funny. You're just saying something that's not true.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And it'd be one thing if at the end he was like, actually, the Russians have done all this thing. But then it's not funny anymore, and comedians, oh gosh.
And he didn't do that.
Yeah. I mean, look, if he's not at all interested in science, maybe like, don't talk about it then. But there are definitely things that people start talking about. So when I first started doing SciComm, I didn't know it was called SciComm. It was just like we were interested in sciencey stuff, and I'd always been interested in science ever since forever. I went to space camp and stuff, and like would go to science
You went to space
Saturdays.
camp.
Yeah, it was so
I'm
fun.
jealous. I would do that
The
now.
Florida one, not the Alabama one. So that one no longer exists. So use that as you will. Now it's called Camp KSC, though it's still there. I visited for something unrelated, and they're like, come behind this curtain, and it was literally the exact same thing. Like I saw where I sat when I was 11.
Oh, fine.
And the like bench was still there, and it still said the Venus team on it and stuff. The mission control was the same. They really need to make some updates.
Now I went to Camp KFC where we ate a lot
yum.
of chicken. Yeah, that was delicious.
Delicious. They told you 5 of the herbs and spices, but not all of them.
Not all of them. Yeah, you got to interpret the rest.
But I learned all these nerdy science things. Then when I started doing it, I had, for the first time, I think in my life, other adult humans who were like, look, we can't all be know-it-alls. So don't we had like frank conversations with each other, these other like science producers who were all, well on in their careers in comparison to me. And they were talking about how they were at this party and someone was talking about this thing and they had just read so-and-so's story about it. And now they were like, felt like a know-it-all because they'd shut down the conversation to tell them the facts. Or like to say, actually, you've got it.
You're the actually guy. Yeah.
And nobody wants to be the actually guy or the actually gal.
Well, actually.
Yeah. And so I end up just shutting my mouth. There have been times at parties, sitting around, in a dimly lit room, sitting on a poof. Someone brings up something.
Paint the picture.
Like, I'm going to say nothing. I'm going to say nothing. I'm going to say nothing. They're like, well, what about you, Trace? Don't you know science? And I'm like, okay. And be like, well, you're close. Like you have some of this stuff right, but there's not a lot of facts there. Like you're not going to come out of that looking good. So I met this guy once, Phil Tippett, lovely man. If you're in the film industry, he's he was the dinosaur supervisor on Jurassic Park. He's big into stop motion animation. He is a friend of mine, knows him through our work. We're at his workshop, and we're going around looking at all the cool stuff he has, and he has a lot of cool stuff. And we get to talking about CERN, the Center for European Nuclear Research, which I visited a few times. He wants to make a project that's about it, but it's about like the destroying the planet black hole kind of side of it. And he's an artist. He wants to do it from like an art side. And as a science side of things, I was like, well, there are some things, if you have questions, let's talk about it. Like I'd be happy to talk about it, but I'm not going to derail his art, even if I disagree with the premise of it, disagree with the premise of like half of Michael Bay's movies. That doesn't mean they shouldn't get made. Like people obviously enjoy them. Yeah. So it's like, what are you going to do? Yeah. I still find him fascinating and interesting, even if I disagree with that one thing that he wants to make. It's not worth it. Yeah. It's not worth the stress on my end. But the LHC is not going to create a black hole. They're using very small masses.
But they are creating parallel universes that change the Fruit of the Loom logo and the Berenstain Bears and
yes, absolutely,
Quaker Oats,
all the different Spider-Mans.
Bob Spiderman.
What if one of the Spider-Verses is literally just like an office worker and they just happen to also have spider powers and they're like, I got these, but like no way am I going to use them. just because
I have this doesn't mean I have to be a hero.
Right. I really look, my CPA career is enough.
In a couple of years, I could make partner.
I would read a 1-book, like maybe a 2-book thread about that. And then maybe, of course, they would have to have a storyline. So he would end up becoming a superhero in some way. But
I actually love that
Spider-Man.
idea of like people with superpowers that are just like, I'm too tired to be a superhero.
Right. That sounds like
Why?
a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I mean, can I just like levitate some cookies over to me or something, you know?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Just like, come on.
I actually had an idea for a while about a guy who just kind of like wakes up one day and can fly.
Cool.
And part of it is also that he has a fear of heights. So
okay.
Yeah, to make it interesting. But also, like, you know, he's, of course, there's that friend that's like, oh, you got to be a superhero, and they like make a cape for him and all this stuff. But he's like, but like, how am I going to be a superhero? Like, just because you can fly doesn't mean that you know when a crime is going down and can, you know, be there for it or something.
That's right.
You know, so it's like you have this cool superpower, but you can't do anything with it.
Yeah. I have this thing that I love when people get too comic book nerdy around me. And there's no such thing as being too nerdy about anything. But I just love to start like little fights about stuff just to see where it goes. You know. And I'm just gonna throw it out there. You cannot have one superpower and be successful. That's the thing I like to lob into a conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's like, oh, well, so-and-so only has one superpower. And I'm like, do they? Like, name a superhero with one superpower. Because they never have one. They always have more than one. And I'll give you an example. Let's say tomorrow you wake up and fly. If you hit a bug, you're dead because you're not invulnerable. And you're flying at a fast speed, and you run into a wall, and you're dead. You crash wrong, you're dead. So, like, you have to have a second superpower to protect you against your first superpower. You're super strong. That doesn't mean you're invulnerable. You're going to bruise your arms. Like, if your skin still has a crushing, like, the same amount of crush amount, no matter how strong your muscles are inside of your body. Like, you know, so yes, super strong doesn't mean your bones are super strong. Could you literally break your own arm by like flexing? Because like you don't have invulnerable bones. Everyone has to have more than one superpower. And then I just watch everybody fight about it. And it's so much fun. And I get in there too. I'm not like a chaos agent, but like it's just fun to talk about because most of the time we think of like, what superpower would you want? And it's like invisibility. And it's like that one you could have as just one, but it depends what you want to do with it. Like, you're not quiet. You're still yourself. You can't see your feet. Are you really good with walking around with your eyes closed? Because that's basically what we're talking about. You don't know where your feet are. If you're invisible, you like...
grabbing things.
Proprioception? Is that what it's... I always pronounce it wrong. But so we did a podcast once. You don't have 5 senses. You have way more. And one of them is, I think it's called proprioception. I'd have to look up the pronunciation. Anyway, it's knowing where your body is in 3D space. So, like, you know where your arm is without looking for it. But if it were invisible, would you know where it is all the time? You know? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Like, trying to grab my arm behind my back.
Where's your arm right now, Joe? Do you know where your foot is?
So there's another idea that I've been playing with, and the basic conceit is that somebody gets their brain transplanted into a donor body.
Cool.
Yeah. And so... and maybe this is a function of me being on YouTube and like talking about sciencey stuff for long enough, but now it's like, I'm like super interested in how that would work and like how medically it could be made possible. And then like, once you get into the other body, like, do you have to relearn the entire body? Is it like learning how to ride a bike all over again or something? Like,
right.
You have to like wire your brain so that like, would the pathways be the same in your brain to control the different parts of your body and stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I mean, they're trying to do this. I think it's an Italian guy's trying to do a
Caravaggio. No, that's an artist.
They're calling it like a head transplant, but it's really a body transplant, unless you think of the body as the real part of the human, like an Egyptian style, right? But it's really a body transplant, but they're calling it a head transplant.
They've been talking about that for a few years now. I haven't heard anything lately.
Yeah. I don't know if they're ever going to get there.
Yeah. I know there was one guy that was like signed up for it because he had this body I don't know. He had
like
this
a
disease.
disorder.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, be weird. I read this book called Bill the Intergalactic Hero. I think it's by Harry Harrison, old sci-fi book. And he gets his arm blown off. He's an idiot, is the premise of the book. He's an idiot, but he's also somehow a hero. He gets his arm blown off, and his best friend is also in the same explosion, but his best friend's arm is salvageable, so he has two right arms. And I always thought, that would be really weird. And one of them's black. One of his right arms is black. And every time he salutes, because he's in the military in this like future world, he salutes with both hands because they're both his right hand. You're supposed to salute with your right hand because he's an idiot. Funny. So it's a funny and dumb book series, but it's fun to think about. Like, what would you do if you had two right hands? You know, like it'd be your thumb would be sticking.
Okay, wait. So does he have a right arm attached to his left shoulder?
His left
it's
shoulder
not like he has
has
two
a right
arms
arm
on one side
attached to it.
Okay.
Yeah. So he has two right arms, which means does his elbow bend incorrect?
So you could say he's all right.
Hey. You could.
Arrested Development joke. He's going to be all right. Well, he lost his left hand, so he's going to be all right.
All right. Yeah. God. That's right. He will be. What a weird book series. But it would be funny to think about, like, I like the idea of what you're saying about your brain is wired for your body. And so if I drop into a different body, do I have to learn, like, is my wiring in my brain a little different? You're like when you jump into a new car and the brakes are touchier and you're like, oh God. So you're like trying to walk and you're like, whoa, man, the thigh muscles on this one is they're really buff. You gotta watch out when I walk.
Yeah. No, I mean, like if you think about like just reaching out and grabbing the coffee cup, you know, all the different muscles you got to flex in just the right way, and you got to position the hand just
your
right.
Own arm.
Right. And how hard to squeeze. And I mean, I'm sure people working on robotics and prosthetic arms and stuff like have to think about that kind of stuff a lot, but there's a lot that goes into it. And I think that, plasticity and everything, I think it could be rewired, but it wouldn't be easy.
Yeah.
You'd be working on that for a while.
Makes me think of Altered Carbon. Did you watch that?
Oh, I saw like one episode of it. I've heard good things.
That's the concept, right? Is like, I can go into a new body just with this bit of technology. And so it's like, there's doesn't seem to be like a learning period, but it's also, this, I don't know how to say Deus ex machina.
Deus ex machina.
That's it. Yeah.
I would say Deus, but
I don't know how to say it. But like they need to be able to drop in and just do whatever they want to do
for narrative reasons.
For narrative reasons. Yeah. It would be very boring if it was like, well, now you're in this new body, but we're gonna have to take a couple weeks to figure this out.
Right.
Like, let's do a montage.
But that's the thing, is like in the idea that I'm kind of playing with, like that would be a big chunk of it, is like really getting into like how that would work, That'd
be cool. I'd read that book.
See, that's nerds get it.
Nerds get it.
Nerds. Well, so I have not ever had a chance to say congratulations on the bebe.
Oh, thanks. Yes.
How's dad life treating
Raphael? He's 5.5 months now, so coming up on 6 months. Actually, more than that, because 6 months is, I think, next week. Dad life is tiring, but also good. So I have a friend here in LA who he has 2 kids, and we went to his house with Raphael for the first time we'd really like gone to see other people with him. He was maybe like 3 months old, and we took him over there and like hanging out with their kid who is 2 and their newborn who was at that point like only a month old. And like and Tim looks at me and he goes, "Kids, yeah, they're the best." And I was like, "Are they?" I don't understand like why people say that. He just shouts at me and like poops and pees on me, and like I have to and my wife has to wake up every 2 hours to feed him, and it's just like very stressful. But then one day he's sleeping in his bassinet next to the bed, and I go to wake him up, and he looks at me and he smiled, and I died. And I was like, got it, Tim, understood, like message received. At first they're newborns and they're cute and they shout a lot and whatever. And like my Apple Watch was like, you need to leave this environment. It's too noisy. Please
Oh.
do not be exposed to this for too long. It
Too
will
many
cause hearing
decibels coming
damage.
out of
And I'm
that
like, I
baby.
can't leave. It's my kid. He's shouting. I don't know what to do.
Apple Watch. Sorry, buddy. I gotta.
Sorry, bud. That's
Yeah.
yeah. Too bad. But now he's learning things. He's starting to string sounds together. My mom would go like, and like he would like make his eyes really wide, and then he one day just started doing it. And I was like, that's crazy. And then this week he started going, because that's what we would do before. We would go, and so then he started going, and so it's like he's learning all the time, and that is the best. Like that I get the like, oh wow, this is cool to like watch him learn things. It's really, really wild. Being a dad is cool. I made a whole series on my channel about stuff I was learning to kind of assuage my own fears about being a dad. It made me realize two things. One, I should probably write a book about dad stuff from a science perspective, because there really aren't good like general audience books on that. They're all like, dude, you're gonna be a dad, don't worry, you're still cool, kind of like books, and I hate that. Like it makes me feel gross. But that's like a lot of dad related books. Meanwhile, mom books are like, here's how to grow while also being a mom. Here's how to be a mom and be a good mom. Here's how to like learn this. Here's how to be an emotionally sensitive mom. Here's how to do that. Like there are a whole gamut.
Yeah. So the mom books are actually helpful, and the dad books are more like, you're still cool.
Yeah, you're okay, dude.
Yeah.
You'll be fine. And it's like, we don't need that book. I would like to know how I can be a good, emotionally open, like dad. I don't want to pass on my traumas to my kid. Can you tell me about that? No, you're just going to make me feel cool and tell me it's cool to still wear t-shirts. Like that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So I feel like I need to just start putting my thoughts down on paper and see if we can make
get a book that tells you how to pick the right New Balance shoes and tuck your t-shirt into your shorts. And...
Right. Yep. I don't own any New Balance yet. You know, I've got to find the right pair. And I don't mow the lawn, so they'll never turn green. So I'm going to have to like borrow someone's lawnmower just to get them.
Speaking of lawnmower, my lawn guy just showed up, so there might be some noise for you and everybody else. Sorry.
I'm trying to think. Can I hear it? No, I can't hear it. It's a good microphone.
It might get a little louder. He's not in the backyard yet. And earlier the dogs were running around in here, and
I didn't hear them at all, but I could see them on the Zooms.
So, I got a little waveform monitor thing here, a little audio monitor audio meter. Anyway, it was like going crazy when they were running around. I was like, oh God, this is going to be really loud. So I'm glad you didn't hear it. Maybe it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, I didn't hear it on my end. Maybe the Zoom didn't hear it either.
I hope not. So I have not had a kid. I have dogs, as you said.
Yeah.
But that's something I've always thought would be really interesting, is just kind of seeing that process of them kind of becoming conscious beings, and like taking in information and learning in that way. And I like what you said about like trying to figure out how to not pass your traumas on to your kid, because like God, I talk about this all the time. Like I really think that mental health is more important than physical health, because there are things that I deal with that were handed down by my mom, that were distilled through my grandmother's issues and stuff. Like you can see a very linear progression. They might not be the same issues. My mom like digested it and turned it into something else, but she handed it off to me, and now I'm doing my thing with it. But
we're all a product of the way we were raised. I used to say that even in college. In my psych classes, we would learn all this stuff, and I distilled it like we YouTubey people do. Distilled it into like, we're all a product of our raising. And my friend who was estranged from her parents was like, no, my parents didn't. And I'm like, but you're a product of that estrangement. That estrangement affects you in the same way that if you were in the same room with them every day, 24 hours a day, you'd be affected differently. Like we are all a product of how we were raised. And so there's no way to raise someone perfectly. No. And that's something that my wife and I tell each other all the time. Like, we're going to mess up. It's fine. Everybody messes up. There's no perfect anything. But like, that doesn't mean we have to follow that linear passing of like, I don't know. I have Irish, French, Spanish, we have like a big mix of Americanness. And some of that is like, there's emotional repression in the men in the United States in general, but like in Irish men, in like there are stereotypes that one can wield however you like. And it's like I would prefer to be more emotionally open with my kid and have him be able to. One of the things I read in the video, let me preface that with this. There was a study which I might have cut out of the video in the end because it was just too much to get into, but like they put audio recorders on dads and they had them interact with their children for a long period of time. They essentially not like had them, they just like recorded them as they interacted in their normal environment. And they found that dads with daughters smiled at their daughters more. They encouraged their daughters when they showed their emotion. Like these are infant daughters, not like, you know, teens. It's like infants. They would treat them differently. And then with their male infants, when their male infants would have neutral expressions, they would like be more encouraging, I guess, or something. Like they would reinforce neutral expressions in boys and emotional expressions in girls.
Gotcha.
And so I am very conscious of when I am reinforcing his behaviors now because of thinking of that. It's like I don't want him to be a neutral person. He is a human. He should be able to show his emotion. And it's like my mom encouraged that in me, and maybe that's a good or a bad thing. I don't know. You know, I'm sure I had troubles because of it, because other men didn't appreciate it. But I don't care what they appreciate. I want him to be a full person. And so like, I don't want him to repress himself. I've seen other dads that are like, it's okay to cry. And I'm like, that is a good example. You know, I watched my brother-in-law talk to his kid, and his kid was crying, and he was like, why are you crying? And he, you know, like 3, so he doesn't have like a real big reason, but he was like, you know, had a reason. And he was like, it's okay to cry. How can we make it better? And it's like, he didn't chastise him for crying. He didn't say, oh, don't cry about that. Or like, be a big boy. It's like, you get to the same result. If you just want him to feel better and stop crying, you don't have to tell him to stop crying. Figure out why he's crying. Tell him it's okay. Let's solve the problem. You know, let's figure it out. I'm not
it's
a
okay
therapist,
to have emotions.
Yeah, but that was like not shocking, but just like it obviously made an impression because I was like, wow, that is awesome. I want to do that.
That's cool. So I spent some time on a therapist's couch.
Sure.
Thank God.
Congratulations.
But at one point, one of the therapists I was talking to was. Can you hear the lawnmower now?
No.
Well, all right. Okay. He's like
but
right
maybe
outside
you
my
can
door.
on your end, but I can't hear it.
All right. I'll just keep going then. But no, talked about shame. Like I have this like inherent shame that is like, and I didn't know anything about like clinically what that meant or anything, you know, so I read some books about it, and it was really interesting because it was talking about how like parents can I guess instill that in their kids accidentally by like helping them out too much. Like if you're a kid and you're tying your shoes and the mom's like, I got to get to the store, hurry up, you know, it's like, here, let me just tie that for you, you know, like in a tiny child that is not fully cooked up here yet, it's like, oh, you think I can't do this, or it instills this sense of like, I'm not good enough because you had to do this for me or something. That's just, you know, a child's interpretation of it. And I don't know, I was like reading that and I was like, think about how like that's sort of an unintended consequence of a parent that was probably trying to help out, thinking they were doing the right thing. And I was just like, I don't think there's any way to not screw up a kid.
Bingo.
You know, all you can really do is just give them the tools to untie the knots that you've tied later on in their lives, you know?
Exactly. Yes. There was,
and I have applied that toward nothing because I don't have any kids.
But you can apply it to yourself and be like, look, they didn't do this on purpose, which is a huge thing. Like, that's a huge part of, I think, understanding that maybe your parents didn't do it on purpose. I know that like my parents were great. Were they perfect? No parent's perfect. That's fine.
I mean, they did their best.
Exactly.
And it wasn't perfect, but here's where we are, you know?
Yeah. And we are a product of that. I think about that kind of stuff all the time, but it's like, when we first had Raphael, he was hours old, maybe days. And like at that point, he needed to eat because he was jaundiced. It just means he has a lot of bilirubin in his body, and to get it out, he has to like eat. So he poops, and he poops out the bilirubin.
Yummy.
And the bilirubin is why they turn yellow. So it wasn't enough to be dangerous, but it was enough that they wanted him to get it out. So we ended up giving him some I think a bottle which isn't normal, or like not normal. There's nothing that's normal with infants. It seems like they're like, they could poop every day, 10 times a day. They could poop once a week. Both are normal. And it's like, oh, well, okay. How with that kind of range do you make any plans?
Right.
And they could do that one day, and the other day switch to the other one, and that's also normal. And it's like, well, shit.
Like, when do I bring him into you?
Yeah. But anyway, so the like lactation consultant comes in, the doctor comes in, and she's like, look, if they suck their thumb, if they suck on a pacifier, all of that is normal. That's why they invented orthodontia. It's fine. Like, you can fix it later. Just let them do what they need to do to soothe now. And then later we have tools to be able to fix any of these. Like, if they suck their thumb too much and their teeth start to do these weird things, we can fix that. That's no problem. And so it's like that attitude I'd not seen before, but I really loved. I was just like, we can fix it. We can, you can course correct along the way. Do what needs to happen now, make sure they're happy and healthy, and then course correct later if there's something that it turns out what you were doing doesn't help. Like, we realized, even down to like the details that, because I'm a nerd, but like, you're holding him in the same way every time, and that's not bad for him, but it's not as good as if you switch it up, right? Like,
is that because he gets used to it and then he doesn't like it?
He gets used to it. Maybe he only turns his head to the right because that's where the breastfeeding is, or like he only turns his head to the right because that's where your bottle is. You need him to turn his head to the left too. Like, he might have like a reason over time. If he doesn't turn his head to the left, it'll stiffen up, and like then he needs physical therapy, which you can fix. But it'd be better if you just like had him kind of. You have to remember as a human that even though we're routine based, you need to switch up those routines, and like, I usually burp him on the right shoulder, sometimes I burp him on the left on purpose, just so he has to turn his head a different direction and like see the world a little differently. Things you never think about unless you have to.
I wouldn't have ever thought of that.
Yeah, it's weird, but it's cool. I'm still me, I'm just a different version, and you'll never go back to being the old version, which is difficult, but also when they smile at you, it kind of makes it better. And he's learning to giggle now, which is awesome. Maybe the best sound ever.
Has it, have you kind of stepped away from your channel a little bit to focus on that?
Yes, I have. I stepped away from the channel after he was born for a while to like be supportive and just be present. And then I made this dad series where I use the words present, engaged, and involved. Which is stuff that kept coming up in the research of like involved parents do this, present parents do this, like engaged parents do that, and they're all benefits. So I tried to bring that up several times in my dad series. And then at the end of the series, I took paternity leave after it posted. I work for myself, so the paternity leave really just means I'm not making things. So I took basically a little over a month off, most of January and February. So then I made a video a couple weeks ago now, and I'm working on a couple more videos right now, some bigger projects, some smaller ones, just to kind of keep things going. But yeah, I definitely took time off, and I wanted to be explicit about that for the same reasons that we've been talking about. It's like men don't think about that kind of leave because our society isn't set up to make them think that. And even in this series, like, I learned a lot about like studies done with union members, with people who do have leave. The men are pressured to come back to work, and it's just a very different. We have a very interesting societal setup, and I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. And so it's like figuring out the best way to push our society to recognize that is to be open about it and say, I'm taking leave, and I'm taking enough leave that it's good for us all. And so I ended up taking like 6 or 8 weeks to just like bond with my kid, and it was great. It was awesome. And I almost wish there was more time. And so we have help during the day here now so I can work, but like during the day I still get to see him, which is awesome. It's not like I go away to an office. Yeah, it is different now because we're all at home and stuff. Yeah. Is there anything you're working on outside of the channel right now? Yeah, I'm doing I'm doing something for a tax company that they needed somebody to co-host their conference. Oh, okay. Called Crush, which is coming up in May, which is going to be cool. It was fun. I learned a lot. Like I said, there's not really much that I don't find interesting. And like, as a small business owner, taxes apply. Yeah. So it was neat to like talk to people that nerd out in the way that we nerd out about our stuff. They nerd out about taxes. And so that was kind of cool. I'm about to start production on a show about kind of the science of it's like risk taking type stuff like trampolines and parachuting and wingsuiting. And so we're going to do some episodes about that. I don't know where it's going to air yet, but they're going to be cool. We start production on that tomorrow. And
Cool.
then I do Stargazers still, which is a PBS show about naked eye astronomy. So we film 3 months of those about once a quarter. We shoot them in my garage and we air them nationwide on PBS. So lots of
Okay.
things outside of YouTube that I do as well. Which is so fun.
Yeah, I didn't know
doing a
about most of
series.
those.
I'm doing a series for the Franklin Institute out of Philadelphia. We did 8 episodes about like historical inventions and how they came to modern ideas like clocks and electricity and like where they came from, but in like a historical context with their chief curator based on artifacts they have at the Franklin Institute, which is really
Oh, that's
cool.
really cool.
Yeah, they have like a Hollerith tabulating machine, which I didn't know what that was, so I went and looked it up. And it's essentially like they used to do the census by hand, the U.S. Census, and it took them 8 years to do the census. So in the Constitution, it says we have to count each other every 10 years, but it took 8 to do the counting. So it's like,
Because by the time they got it, it was time to start the
it
next
was time
one.
to start the next one, exactly. And like, so fascinating. So Herman Hollerith comes up with this idea where essentially it's a punch card machine, but it was in like I can't remember exactly when, around the turn of the last century, I think a little before. And it's essentially a bunch of dials in a cabinet. And they put the punch cards in, and it adds one to like, oh, there's this many people in this house, so we'll add that number. And they like had dials for each answer, and they could tabulate all of this stuff. And that is the precursor to a lot of what we use today in computing. So it's like one of the many early computers. So I didn't know anything about that, but they used it, and it made the census go from years to just like months to tabulate because they don't have to hand count it anymore. It was a fun series to put together, and that's on Franklin Institute's website. So, I do a lot of those kind of projects outside of YouTube as well, which also makes it tough sometimes to do YouTube all the time because I'm traveling for that or I'm working on those productions. I like to think of my YouTube channel as my full-time side project. It's like always there. If that work starts to wane, then I spin up more YouTube stuff. I'm trying to make more stuff though, because I think it's just fun to have that creative outlet. And
My whole thing is I put out videos weekly. I've been doing that for like 7 years, and I've got this whole machine around it now. And it's kind of hard to break off from that to do outside stuff, even if it's just like fun, creative stuff that I want to do. It's always, I'm always struggling with that.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'll ever get it quite figured out. I'm trying to do it without like causing a big gap in my YouTubing, but that might just have to happen sometime.
I mean, I think the fear of having a gap is people are like, well, if I go away, they'll forget about me. And that doesn't seem to play out in the data that I've seen. People will be
because you post
excited
pretty
that you're
irregularly.
back. I do. I don't post regularly at all. I used to. I did for a while. I was posting every week, and then I was posting every couple of weeks, and now I post like when I post. I'm on the Vsauce schedule now. Like when it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
I would like to post more regularly, so I'm actually working with trying to like hire some people to help me keep things on the rails when I can't. And that's fun. It's a whole different kind of work. But like if you go away for a bit, no one, like I learned from the parenting stuff. I thought, okay, the algorithm will ding me more than even the audience. But I made these 5 videos in a row that I released over a week and a half, which is wild. I'm sure they cannibalized each other in some way, but I was like, I just need to get them out so I can go on parental leave. Came back, made one video. That video is like the second most popular video I've released in a year. And so it's just like, didn't seem to matter. The algorithm didn't care. The people who watched it didn't care. It told me that my subscribers were more interested, but also it had a really good click-through rate. So it was like, awesome. All win, win, win. And I got to take time off, and it didn't seem to affect my channel at all. So
I took 1 month off, actually last April, so it was a year ago. And that's the only time I've ever taken a significant break from YouTube. And it was funny how, again, when I'm in this process of constantly putting out another video, like it took probably 3 weeks of that month before I could even just adjust to it. and just kind of get myself to be like, I don't have to do anything right now. Like,
right.
I was constantly like trying to find something to fill my time. It's like, no, I need to just like relax.
Just
and
relax.
It was so hard to relax.
You don't have to think about what your next video is going to be, or like what, you know, you can email yourself ideas. That's how I let myself do a little work. It's like, don't check your email, but you can email yourself ideas.
It'll be there
Don't
later.
go into your pitch document and try and pitch them. Just email a link to yourself. That's fine. Do that. And that helped a lot. I also rebuilt my studio during my paternity leave, so maybe I'm not one to talk. It was still
that was something else I did last April. It's like, well, it's been the first 2 weeks just redoing everything over here.
Yeah, because you end up like, I don't know. When you work for yourself and your livelihood is this, you do feel like you have to feed that machine, that monster all the time. And I say monster not in a negative way, although it is considered, has a negative connotation. It's more like it's more like feeding a pet. You know, you love it and you want it to keep living, so you have to keep feeding it.
Right.
But it turns out YouTube is more like having a cat that's allowed to go outside. Like, it can go feed itself, but it will come back. Don't worry. Like, you can go away for the weekend. It's not going to die. It'll be fine.
From time to time, YouTube will leave dead mice on your front porch.
And they'll be like, oh, love you. Here's a dead mouse. Don't worry. I know this is weird for you. You're welcome.
Yeah.
I also vomited in your shoes.
Oh, yeah. We used to have 2 cats, and there's still scratches on all of our furniture from when we had them.
Aww.
Love scratches.
I have 2 kitties. They're the cutest. One's an asshole. And
I now have 2 puppies.
It's fine. I see one right there.
Yeah, she always wants up on my lap. This is Phoebe.
Hi, Phoebe.
Most people know Zoe because she's the cult leader of my channel.
Oh, okay.
There's a small cult around her.
Off at a cult meeting right now. So Phoebe's
she's got her parishioners doing
some
social work or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Working in a field somewhere, barking at the door.
It's like she heard it. She knew what was up.
Oh, a leaf blew by outside, so she's barking. Okay, yeah, you got to go check it out too. There you go. Okay.
That's
well,
funny.
On that note, I think I'll go ahead and start trying to wrap this up. I just wanted to say, as I roll over my own cord here, to anybody listening, you and I met September.
I guess, yeah. Well,
in Puerto Rico?
When did we go to Puerto Rico? First week of August last year.
Okay. I just remember my wife had just gone back to school and she was mad because she couldn't go. But Standard, for those listening and wonder why I'm talking about this, the company that we both have kind of reps in, they do a retreat every year, and this is the only one I've ever been able to go to. Oh my God, she was flipping out.
I mean, the stereotype is there's like a mail carrier outside.
Well, it's our lawn guy, and she's losing her mind.
Love it.
Great timing.
Perfect timing.
Anyway, we were both in Puerto Rico, and I got to meet you for the first time. And, I've been following you for years. And so I was kind of like excited to get to meet you. And then we like kind of became buddies, and like,
I know, I loved
we
it.
connected, and I was like, oh my God, I'm friends with Trace Dominguez. That's amazing.
It's nerds. I love nerds. I mean, it's always nice to be able to talk to somebody. One, you're good at talking to people, so good job on a podcast about conversations. Like,
I make it about conversations because I don't want to like structure it. I just want to meet people. I just want to like meet people that I find interesting and chat.
I love that, because it's like sometimes you go on a podcast and people want to talk about, I don't know. I think of like friends who are authors, and they're like, they just invited me on to talk about my book, but then we end up talking about all sorts of other cool stuff.
Yeah,
and it's like that's why I've enjoyed this process, because it's just like, we just shoot the shit.
Yeah,
it's nice. And that's basically what we did in Puerto Rico. It was great.
Yeah,
you were an excellent Puerto Rico companion.
We were touring that old fort, and you were talking about what your old days at the
museum. Yeah. Oh, that was a cool fort too. It was neat to see the toilets, and they just like fell out into the ocean. But whatever.
Into the world ocean toilet.
Yeah, it was great. I'd never been to Puerto Rico. It was lovely.
Same here. But no, I just wanted to say I really enjoyed getting to know you and meet you, and I was wanting to get you on here just to catch up, because we haven't really been in touch since then. So
I know it's been almost a year since we went. And like, I feel like once
Amazing.
I had a kid, everything kind of
Yeah.
falls by the wayside because it's like they just let you take them home. They're like, well, here you go. Keep this thing alive for the next decade or 2 or 4 or whatever.
And here's
Good
the bill.
luck. Yeah, thanks for the bill. And you're like, but how? What do we? And they're like, we don't do that. We just give you the kid. Thanks. Bye.
Just it's nature. Just
Yeah.
we've been doing this
Instinct,
for a long
man.
time.
Just give them just instinct. Here,
Everybody else in
books or
history has
whatever.
figured it out. You will too.
Exactly. And so, but it fills up a lot of your time, like surprisingly,
Yeah,
because they wake up every 45 minutes. They want to eat or they want to play. He's too young to play by himself, really. So he's starting to do that, but it's like, whew, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But it's also like I said, it's fun, but it also means that like I have no adult relationships really anymore. Like we went to Korean barbecue and we were like, this is so fun. It was the only thing we did like in months. We went out one night.
Do you have family nearby that can kind of like watch? Yeah.
No. Yeah, my family's in Michigan still, in the house I grew up in. My parents. My brothers live in Texas and Washington State. And then my wife's family is all in New York and Brazil. So we're spread pretty far from family, but we have lots of friends now. We're making new friends in LA. We literally met somebody at a park yesterday who was wearing a shirt that said like Michigan on it. And we were like, oh, hey, where are you from in Michigan? And he's like, oh, you're from Michigan too? And we had like a little conversation. My wife was like, can we get your number? And it's like having a kid and being a married couple. It's sort of like you have to date other married couples. You're just like, oh, do you have a kid and you're also married and you live in this neighborhood? We're going to have to, we're having a play date. And I used to think play date meant kids are playing together, but it really means excuse for adults to hang out while with kids. It's very weird.
They're the only ones that get it.
Yeah,
probably.
It's very, very odd. I mean, we still have single friends. I'm trying to not be that person who's like, oh, you're unmarried. We can't spend time together. You're crazy going to the club. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, we're not. I don't want to do that. But it is tougher because it's like somebody who's doesn't have a kid. It's harder to explain. Like, I can't make a plan for 2 weeks from now because I don't know what the kid's mood is going to be, but I also have to make a plan for 2 weeks from now. It just has to have that like linchpin of if the kid's in a bad mood, the plan doesn't happen. Makes it real weird.
Subject to change.
All plans are tentative until confirmed on the day.
So again, not having had a kid, but we've had a couple of different puppies. I mean, they were puppies when we got them, and that's the closest thing I can imagine to it. Cause like they can't go more than 2 hours before you got to let them outside or else you have an accident to clean up. And it's just like, you have to be in the same room with them all the time. Mm-hmm. Now that passes in probably, I don't know, 9 months or so, but
it's not that unusual. I feel like there's very similar kind of experiences between, or I've never had dogs. I would take care of dogs growing up and like had friends with dogs, but we never had dogs. And like that's similar how I thought of like having a kid was like having a dog, where you have to be present there. I always thought having cats is like having roommates. Sometimes a roommate wants to chill out with you and watch a movie. Sometimes they want to go hang out by themselves. Both are cool. Having dogs is like having a toddler all the time. You have to like watch them, do things with them. They can play by themselves, but they don't always, You have to be there for them. So it's like, there's definitely an analog there for sure.
Well, the one that was on my lap a second ago, she's she turned 1 in December, so she's 1.1 year, 4 months, whatever. Anyway, we're just now getting to where we feel like we can leave the house and not worry about something getting torn up or destroyed.
Yeah.
And even still, I start to feel weird if I'm out of the house for too long with them home. And hopefully that will go away soon because I don't like it feeling that way.
Yeah, that's tough. Luckily with a toddler, well, in this case with a several month old, we can't even leave the house without taking him with us.
Right.
Now I'm the dad with the baby strapped to my front. We put a blanket under his butt so he's tall enough and he like looks around and he's like happy as a clam. But I don't even know what I'm going to do when we can just like leave the house. It's just here. We're like a decade from
that. Yeah, that's a ways
more.
Out.
But also like at some point, that's weird to think about. he's going to be his own person.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even with a puppy, you can put it in a crate and
True.
head out and do something, you know,
Yeah.
like you can't bring a puppy with you everywhere. Cause if you go to a restaurant, they're like, get that dog out of here. But, I'm not trying to say that having a kid is the same as having a puppy. It's totally
no, I don't think anybody, but there's similar skill sets involved. Like, I think, you know, it is very similar, I think, in some ways, just the way that you think about being at home. When I had no pets, I was single, no pets, nothing. I could leave the house for as long as I wanted. I could come back whenever I wanted. I didn't have to do anything when I got home except for go to bed. You know, I didn't have any plants to water. I didn't have anything that needed needed food from me or like needed me to clean up something after it. I would just come home and go to sleep. And so, like, having a pet in general, you've already started that skill path. Some people are like, oh, having plants is like having kids. And it's like, sure, there are similar skill sets in that you have to take care of something or it will die. Different, very different from a living animal. But
I've just carried around your plant with you everywhere you went. If your plant was breastfeeding, that's probably the line right there. I think that's the line.
You just need those breastfeeding fly traps. That's
Venus breast traps.
I'm sure
somebody make that.
There's a fashion thing out there somewhere. One of the Met Gala years should be biology. That would be wild. Right. I'd love that.
It will someday. Probably, maybe. We'll see.
Maybe.
Well, I think I need to wrap this up, but it's always good to see you, man.
It's so good to see you. Thanks for having me on. If once you start doing repeats, call me back.
Absolutely. We'll just be the same one every week. It's like, Trace again? Gee.
Wow, geez, God. Yeah, we're just shooting the shit again.
All right. Thanks to Trace for taking some time to chat with me. It's always fun hanging out with him. Go check out his channel, Uno Dose of Trace. And let me say that slower. I said that really fast. Uno Dose of Trace. You get the pun. Anyway, there's all these other places that I also mentioned. You can go check him out there. Honestly, I didn't know he had so much going on. That's really cool. So yeah, go check it out. Trace is a great guy. This episode was produced by Kimmy Britt, edited by Brave Brown. I'm Joe Scott. You can find me at Answers with Joe pretty much everywhere on the socials. Of course, my YouTube channel is Answers with Joe. There's also Joe Scott TMI. It just keeps going. I just keep putting out more stuff. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening. Please do share this if you thought this was interesting. A nice review on whatever podcast player you're listening to right now goes a long way, and that's really well appreciated. So until next time, thanks. Have a good one. Now go out there and start some conversations of your own. All right, take care.